If you find this healing sleep meditation sleep story helpful or interesting, feel free to give it a thumbs up, share with someone who may find it useful, and leave any comments below. If you don't want to miss any future sleep stories, you can subscribe and click the bell notification icon. My sleep stories are made with you, for you, and posted weekly here on YouTube. You can access all my sleep stories, add an introduction free on my Sleep Stories podcast, my alternative to Patreon, where you can also download the stories for offline listening. They're also all available without this YouTube introduction on most streaming and downloads services like Apple Music, Amazon Music and Spotify. If you're interested in what else I offer, you can find details of all of this and my hypnotherapy and autism e-courses, books and merch in the description and on my website danjoneshypnosis.com. So I hope you enjoy this story.
So as you take a moment to just allow your eyes to close, you can listen to me in the background. And as you listen to me, I don't know whether you'll drift asleep faster to the sound of my voice or to the spaces between my words. But as you begin to comfortably drift asleep, I'll just tell this sleep meditation in the background. And this meditation is about a woman who's the 28th generation on a galactic spaceship. And this spaceship had left Earth many centuries earlier and has been travelling out towards the stars. And it's a huge spaceship containing a large colony of humans, an entire society of humans. And from the outside, the spaceship appears to be slowly rotating around a central core. And on the inside, the inhabitants will walk around and live their lives around the outside of that central core, with the spinning of that ship feeling like gravity of Earth. And every day they receive updates of the trip progress. And centuries earlier, hundreds of people on Earth agreed to make this trip to the stars as an entire colony. And the way this ship works is that it starts off with a lower powered propellant, and then as it increases in speed, it changes to a different propellant, scooping up hydrogen from the front of the ship and channeling that through the ship, using that as the fuel. And the faster it goes, the more fuel it scoops up and the more fuel it can use. And as it continues to scoop up that fuel, it continues to increase in speed. And the pressure of this increase in speed fills inside the ship, almost like there's a force pushing, like a wind, across the people living inside the ship. But as it's something they live with their entire life, they get used to it and it's just part of everyday life. In the same way that on Earth, you just get used to the pressure of the weight of the atmosphere on your body. And as the ship continues to travel through space, so it's now travelling at close to the speed of light. But with such vast distances, it still takes an incredibly long time to arrive at a destination. And after 28 generations, only now is it nearing the target star. And there's no way to slow the craft down. The idea is for these people to permanently live on this ship, but as they near their target stars and slingshot around stars travelling within the solar systems of the various stars, they release probes that will circle those stars, that will scan and monitor those solar systems, that will autonomously explore the solar systems and autonomously self-replicate. And they'll find moons and planets. They'll take the resources that are required to replicate themselves enough to have those monitoring probes spread throughout the solar system. And those probes then beam signals back to a master probe that's able to do a highly focused beam towards the ship, and always keeps that ship in its sights. So with each star system passed is additional information and scientific knowledge that can be gained. And as that spacecraft approaches that star, all the inhabitants gather in a room with a giant screen, and they all watch on that giant viewfinder as they see that star, and they look closely to see what planets they can notice. And they watch as their craft approaches that star, almost grazes the edge of the star as it slingshots around the star at almost the speed of light, before shooting off in a direction towards the next target star. And as it leaves that star system, those on the spaceship know that it'll be many years before this ship arrives at the next star. And as it arrives at the next star, the same will happen again, that the spaceship will slingshot around that star, will drop off some probes before continuing back out deep into space. And this spaceship has an unusual trajectory. It started from the Earth, and instead of heading into the galactic plane, the decision was made to fire it in a trajectory upwards, so that a distant generation would be able to look down and see the Milky Way, and see what that Milky Way really looks like. And it means that that future generation will eventually go beyond the stars of the Milky Way, and that they'll be further from all of those stars in the Milky Way. They'll be the most distant life in the galaxy, and the trajectory that the ship is on would begin to take it towards a distant galaxy, where they might discover new life and new worlds, and can make huge discoveries about what life is like and what the conditions are like in a completely different galaxy. And so, because of the trajectory of this spaceship, it was important that the ship contained everything that was needed for those on the ship to enjoy their lives, to have families, to have pets, to have a green and lush world. And the central column in this spaceship, the part facing towards the spinning external part of the ship, glows almost like the glowing of the sun. And that's just panels on the outside of that central column. And it glows for about 12 hours. And then it gradually dims to just the faintest, almost a moonlight glow for about 12 hours. Before then increasing in brightness again, glowing for another 12 hours, like the daylight of the sun, and just repeating this cycle. And there are people who harvest crops, there are schools, shops, and to all these people now, 28 generations later, this life just feels perfectly normal. They've barely got a concept of the fact that they're not on a planet. And it's so vast in this spacecraft that they don't feel for a second that they need to be elsewhere. And because it's so vast, as the bright sunlight-like light shines, it evaporates water up into the atmosphere, and that eventually condenses and rains down. And they have weather cycles, and none of it's too extreme, just a light rain from time to time, and the most beautiful daytimes. But this woman's curious about what life would be like elsewhere, and she's watched this flyby of this solar system, experienced the slingshot onto a new trajectory, continuing its preset path that will eventually take this ship up and out of the galaxy. And she spends the next half-dozen years exploring the idea of disembarking with the probes. But she doesn't know, with any given star system, whether there'll be planets that support life. But she's curious about the idea of settling down in one place and exploring all that that place has to offer. In the 28 generations that this spacecraft has been flying, it's never encountered any intelligent life. It's never encountered any spacefaring life. Probes have fed back about bacterial life, about microbes being found, has fed back images of worlds that could sustain life, which just don't happen to have life on them currently. And so she's curious. She would like to just stop and explore for herself. But after half a dozen years of looking into the idea of stopping off, seeing if it's possible to disembark with the probes, but uncertain because she'd be all alone, the spacecraft receives a signal. It detects what seems like a regular, intelligent being made signal. And they know that it's not a pulsar or a magnetar or a black hole. They know that this seems to be a complex pattern of information, and the ship can't slow down quickly. It can't slow down enough to stop or to do more than just pass through these star systems. But as it approaches, it detects on the telescopes attached to the ship that there's a planet that seems to have ships encircling it and satellites encircling it, that there seems to be satellites and objects on other planets, and even satellites circling the star. And as usual, they approach that star, and they monitor and they look at the planets with their telescopes, with their various instruments, and they drop off the probes. They release those probes into this solar system, and they approach the star to slingshot around it. And as they do, they notice that there's a smaller craft that seems to be accelerating and catching up with them, and seems to come alongside their large spacecraft. And they receive a signal from this craft, and using a translator, they communicate back with that craft. The translator picks out the patterns in the communication and converts that into their language. And they communicate backward and forward and find out what this civilization is like. And the woman and a small team of others volunteer to stay behind, to explore this system further, to connect with this alien race, to find out more details. And they know from the approach that the alien world that these aliens are from can sustain human life perfectly fine. And they know that there's risks, but at the same time their technology is advanced enough that they're able to protect against viruses, bacteria that could be on any planet. And they can protect the other way. They can prevent viruses and bacteria from being able to spread from the humans to aliens. And so, for the first time in 28 generations, they decide they need more than perhaps just the probes. Maybe this team of humans could land here, start a settlement on this alien world, gathering further information. And these aliens seem to be as advanced, if not slightly more advanced, than the ship that they're in and the capabilities they've got. They imagine that those back on Earth 28 generations later are probably as advanced as this alien civilization in terms of the technology they're using. Whereas this ship has been travelling for centuries and is running on advanced technology that may well have been superseded since it left Earth. And theoretically, those on the ship have more knowledge and are more advanced than they seem. They've had 28 generations of space exploration, scientific discoveries, knowledge advancement, but their actual technologies have remained the same, with very little apparent advancement, because they haven't needed to, and it hasn't been practical to do so. And so the alien ship that's flying alongside this spaceship has the aliens on board that ship communicating with the humans, sharing knowledge between the two species, with the humans sharing their discoveries and knowledge of many star systems, and these aliens sharing that they've not yet done a similar thing. They've not yet gone and explored the stars in the same way. They've sent probes to nearby stars at almost the speed of light. They've now developed spacecraft which can contain beings that can accelerate rapidly to almost the speed of light. But they've not yet created a community in space for long-term galactic travel. And while that alien craft remains alongside the spaceship, that woman and the crew leave the spaceship, travel to the alien craft, which then turns away and travels back to its home world. And back at its home world, that alien craft lands, and the woman excitedly disembarks, smelling that fresh air for the first time ever, feeling the real gravity of a planet, seeing what it looks like on a planet, the vast open spaces, tall buildings and cities, an arching sky overhead that in daytime is blue with clouds. At night time they can see stars in the sky, being able to feel the wind on their face, to touch different plants and stroke small animals. And she finds this an awe-inspiring experience. And the communication devices they wear allow them to understand the aliens and to communicate with the aliens understanding them. And this small group of settlers on this alien world enjoy setting up a community, learning, interacting with these aliens, learning their languages, learning how they structure their languages, exploring the variety of a real world, discovering mountains and valleys and oceans and ocean life, discovering caves, discovering vast open meadows, exploring different buildings, different cultures, trying different foods, and every day reporting back and beaming the information back to the satellite that beams it over to the spaceship, which they're aware is travelling further away every day, and finding themselves just so amazed at the variety that on the spacecraft they had no idea at the extent of the variety of an actual planet. They had seen photos, they'd seen videos, of planets, including the Earth. But nothing beat actually really being there. Although the spacecraft was nice, there wasn't much variety. Everything was placed where it was by humans. The shoreline on the spacecraft felt like a beach. But if you dived in the water, you couldn't swim down very far before you reached the bottom, reached the wall of the spacecraft. The water wasn't full of ocean life, and the woman felt that she'd made the right decision to stop off and explore this planet, and to grow old on this planet, and that travelling allows you to discover new worlds every few years, perhaps every half dozen years, and then to trawl over the information and view the information as it beams from the probes. But nothing beats actually stepping foot on an alien world and exploring the complexity, the variety there. And she makes such good friends with some of these aliens and enjoys going out for meals with them. Enjoys doing a lot of the same things that she's always done with her friends on the spaceship. But is aware that on this single planet there's more to explore and discover than she was ever likely to explore and discover in space. And one night, while thinking positively about her discoveries, about her new friends, about what she's already done and what she's got to look forward to, places she would love to visit and explore, species she'd love to discover and get close to, she drifts and floats so peacefully and comfortably asleep, knowing that she's pleased with the new life that she's got, drifting and floating so peacefully and so comfortably asleep.